Welcome back to Inside the Pastor Study Podcast. My name is Pastor Jeremy.
And I'm Pastor George.
And we hope that you and your family had a wonderful and Merry Christmas. We are actually recording this prior to Christmas. This is one of those magical cheating things we get to do. But just in advance, thank you, Dad, so much for all of those wonderful gifts you got me. I hope you liked whatever I got you.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah, so good. Yay.
Yeah, the
Yay,
question
Christmas.
is, did Mom like what you got her?
Oh man, that's just, she is that person. We all have that person that when you get to them on your list, you say, how will I buy for them? And not a good answer for her. I don't know. It's always tricky. Yeah, so she is. She's one of those very difficult people to shop for. We all have those people on our lists. And goodness, you never know. Like if she's just going to love it or if it's going to be one of those, thanks. I feel like more often than not, it's an thanks response.
Yeah.
She just like, she's one of those people who just kind of goes out and gets what she wants when she wants things.
She does. And I guess the thing is, she is such a wise giver. She just has this ability to understand and know exactly what people want or need. And I mean, she just cuts right to the chase. And quite often her gifts are so good that you find yourself saying, man, why can't I do the same thing for her?
That does make it difficult. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh man. So anyway, all of that
good
talk,
Christmas, though.
Yeah, it was a wonderful Christmas that we haven't had yet. Yeah.
Yes.
So we do, with this idea of Christmas, we're actually going to have kind of a Christmas conversation here in a little bit. But before we get into that, we do want to talk about our theological term of the week. So without further ado,
the theological term of the week.
what is our term this week for our theological term of the week?
Our theological term this week is the term depravity.
Ooh, we're getting into a messy one today, huh?
Yes, we're going to talk about depravity.
Okay.
And one of the reasons we're talking about depravity is we started this line talking about soteriology, which is the doctrine of salvation. But in that line of talking about the doctrine of salvation, we also somewhat have to mix in our doctrine of sin, because why should we talk about being saved if we don't define what we're being saved from? Like, if you have, and this is one of the ongoing issues in sharing the gospel with people, is that a lot of people don't necessarily see themselves as in a predicament or in a situation where they need salvation.
Yeah, I think this is one of those misunderstood phrases or comments from Jesus when he talks about the rich being saved or getting into heaven, right?
Right, like their wealth is the thing that keeps them from getting.
And I think ultimately that's always been a commentary on how when you are self-sufficient, you don't tend to recognize how needy you are for the gospel.
Are we talking about Mom and Christmas presents again?
And so when you're in that space, right, it becomes very difficult to understand it. And I think that's the difficulty for the wealthy. They don't necessarily understand how desperately they need salvation, because they can look at their lives and say, well, most of my needs are met and I feel relatively good. Things go well for me. And
let me look to what others need.
Yeah. But the truth is that that we all are depraved. We all have sin, and we're all, as Romans says, we all fall far short.
Yes.
Of the standard.
Yeah. So that's the standard. That's the concept. The concept of depravity is how basically depravity is, am I sinful, and am I sinful enough? And we get into all kinds of categories, all kinds of understandings of this idea of depravity. Like some individuals would say, I'm sinful, but I am capable of overcoming my own sin by introducing enough good things into my life so that I can be saved. God will see out the work that I've done and that I've overcome my sin rather than being depraved, which means that I am incapable of actually pleasing God because of my sinfulness.
So that really is a big distinction for so many. I think there's most people with at least a little bit of self-awareness are able to say that are able to point to things in their lives that they are not proud of, that they would say this has been something that, I mean, if you don't use the term sin, you would at least you would often use the word mistake, or areas where they have been bad. We can all like acknowledge those things in our lives. But I think for so many, we think of our good and bad on a seesaw. And if we can throw enough good things on the one end of the seesaw, then the bad stuff doesn't become all that bad. And so we spend our lives searching for the good things to put on top of the seesaw.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Islam actually takes this concept and they talk about good and bad from the concept of a tightrope walker. And as long as you are balanced in your goodness, you can retain your position on the tightrope. But if you unbalance yourself in your walk with Allah and your following of the Quran, then you will fall off of the tightrope. So there's that good bad thing. But I think the other issue that we run into with depravity is just how much sin does one have to commit to be depraved? Because we look at that word depravity or the word depraved, and we think of the most miserable people in the world. We think
it always goes to Hitler.
I was going to say
the only depraved human being in history.
The only person in hell is Adolf Hitler for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they look at him and they see his depravity. Adolf Hitler and all the SS troopers from World War II. Yeah,
sure. His whole crew is with him.
Right, his whole crew. Yeah, they're the only people actually in hell by a lot of people's standards, because the concept is, well, I'm not that bad. And depravity is not a horizontal measurement tool. I don't look at everybody else. We used to talk about this with you guys, right? It's like all of your friends would say, "Well, the pastor's kid did it."
Therefore,
like you were suddenly the measure of morality and virtue.
Oh, that would be terrible for others.
That'd be awful, right?
Yeah.
So
we're setting the bar real low.
Yes, it's not a horizontal measure; it's a vertical measure. And so, the thing about depravity is it boils down to this: it is, I am bad enough to keep me from eternity. It's not that I'm so bad that God is going to reject me, because no one would agree with that.
Right.
It's I am bad enough so that God will not see my sin. And so I see that as something that's total and complete. There's no way of getting around it.
Right. And that's the issue. That is the issue here. There's because of God's perfection, any little bit of sin prohibits us from being in his presence.
Yes.
And so any bit of sin is enough to say that you are depraved enough that you cannot on your own erase this or outweigh it or hide it. Any sin is enough to prohibit us from heaven.
Exactly. So the need for salvation comes from the fact that every single one of us not only has fallen short, but that falling short is such that God has to reject us. So that's foundational. That's kind of our term of the week, depravity. The theological term of the week.
There it is. So depravity, theological term of the week. So there we are. So we'll hit some more of these conversations in soteriology in coming weeks, but this one you kind of have to start with. You have to start with that, like our current status. This is your status before salvation, and it's everybody's status prior to salvation.
Everyone. Yep.
All right. So we just had Christmas. We talked about this already. So Christmas is Christmas continues, in the strictest sense. I think that Like we in my house, we've kind of always like kept the Christmas tree up until our anniversary. Our anniversary is January 6th. That's Epiphany. That's like the kind of the end of
The visit of the wise men.
yeah. So
Yes.
that is the end of the Christmas holiday, so to speak. So we're still in Christmas, but the day itself has now come and gone. And we wanted to talk about one of the more controversial conversations around this idea of Christmas for the average Christian. And that is, especially for Christian parents, what do you do with Santa Claus?
Santa Claus. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I love Santa Claus. I've had many friends who have been on both sides of this aisle. You know, a lot of Christian friends who are like, I am never ever going to teach or talk about Santa Claus because it waters down and changes the belief system of my children.
Yeah, and I've heard, one of the things I've heard is like people will equate Jesus with Santa Claus. They'll say like,
Yeah.
well, you know, if my child believes in Santa, and then ultimately they find that Santa is something that has been invented, then they will also question their faith because you can't prove Jesus's existence either. And so I will create for my child an unnecessary crisis of belief. And so in order to avoid all of this, I won't talk about Santa at all.
So I made the decision before you guys were all born that I actually knew what I was going to do and what I was going to say when that ultimate question came of, Daddy, is there a Santa Claus? And I had made the decision the best way to handle that was the truth. So I said yes.
It's true. This is the same tack I've taken because it is actually true that there was
A Santa Claus.
a Santa Claus.
And it's an awesome story.
So good. Yeah.
It really
I
is.
love
It's
this.
fantastic.
So, give us like, who is Santa?
All right, so Santa is a man named Nicholas. That's why he's Saint Nicholas. That got changed in European parlance to Santa Claus. Saint Nicholas was a great man of God. He was born in Turkey, somewhere around, I think it was 247 AD, so very early in church history. And his parents died when he was very young, but his parents were also disgustingly wealthy. Like absolutely, they just had huge wealth. And so he died. He becomes heir of all of it, kind of like the daughter of the in and out people, I guess. You know? So he has all of this wealth, and his uncle, who's also named Nicholas and is the pastor of a church, priest, takes Nicholas in and raises him. And because he's raised by his uncle, he also becomes a priest and serves God. He actually is he's a pastor of a church in Syria for a long time, and then eventually he's elevated to be the Bishop of Myra. So he's known in church history as Saint Nicholas of Myra. That's Myra, which is
That's a great Lamborghini.
it is. Well, it's a little town on the southern seacoast of Turkey.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Myra itself doesn't exist today, but there's some Turkish towns that are near it, and you can go and visit in the area. And I was looking online the other day just to confirm all of this because it's Christmas time, and you have to do this. And there's actually a Myra bed and breakfast down in that
lovely.
that area. So
If you're ever in town.
if you're ever in town, there's at least a bed and breakfast, so you can go and visit that. So here's the thing: this is guilt by proximity. The Nicholas was a great man, and the church honored him by setting up the fourth Sunday of the month of December as the feast of Saint Nicholas. Well, that means that falls really close to Christmas, which is always the 25th of December. So it's another one of those. It's another one of those holidays that just kind of comes with the package.
So when you say happy holidays, you could actually be celebrating both of those two things.
Absolutely, you could be.
This is like a rabbit trail for me. I'm not mad at somebody saying happy holidays to me.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Like, and in addition, like, I get it. Like, and I know some of you will like hear that and like reply back quickly with Merry Christmas to you. And that's great. Go ahead. But
Yeah.
there are multiple holidays this time of year. And that poor person checking you out after bagging your groceries wants you to enjoy all of them. It's okay.
Absolutely.
They can like
Absolutely.
wish you happy because they don't know when you're going to come back in.
Sure, and
Yeah.
they don't want you to body slam them because you celebrate Kwanzaa or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Which,
so-
yeah, one of the 10 people in the country that actually does celebrate that.
Yeah. So it's okay, Christian. Like, don't
Yeah.
get your nose bent out of shape over somebody saying Happy Holidays.
Absolutely.
But,
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
wish them a Merry Christmas and tell them you'll see them before New Year's too, and wish them a Happy New Year's as well.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Let me get back to Nicholas.
Back to Saint Nick.
Back to Nicholas,
Yeah.
Saint Nick, because here's the thing that distinguishes Nicholas and that really kind of propels him. He's an amazing guy. He has all of this wealth that he doesn't actually need, and he takes a concern. There was an ancient Roman practice that kind of got lost in the sauce as Christianity is beginning to take over most of the Roman world. We're talking
Right,
300,
Constantine,
so
right, yeah.
we're actually talking 300, 320. So Christianity hasn't actually come to tolerance yet, per se, but it's not being persecuted as much. Though we have to make this clear, and that is that Nicholas actually did suffer some very serious persecution early in his life. He was incarcerated. He was beaten. He was held accountable for the gospel. He never, ever, ever let go of his belief in Christ, and he stood firmly for that, even though he suffered for his belief in a time when Christianity was not legitimate. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
there was an ancient Roman practice, and that was that within that culture, young women had to pay something called a dowry price. They had to have a certain amount of money, in other words, to get married and to have good marriages. Otherwise, you could end up just marrying some slug, or even worse, in the culture, if you couldn't purchase your way into a good marriage, you could end up in prostitution. And Nicholas, recognizing that this was an ongoing practice, even though Christianity was becoming strong, he desired very much that the young women of his congregation would retain their chastity and get into good marriages. So he would watch for the young women of his church, and he would watch over them very carefully, and he would make sure that they had the money that they needed to get a good marriage and to actually pay a dowry price that they needed. So the story goes that he would always try to do this very quietly. He didn't necessarily want people to know that he had all of the gazillions of drachmas that he had. So what he would do is he would quietly put money into the hands of these young ladies in the form of gold coins and little bags. And the story goes that he would do it quietly. One of the ways he would do that is that quite often people would take their stockings off, their socks off, and dry them by putting them by their window, by the window frame of their house. And what Nicholas would do is quietly in the evening, he would come by to a young woman's stockings, if you will, and drop a small gold bag or a small sack of gold coins into their sock. And they would, lo and behold, they would wake up in the morning and they would find a sack of gold that would enable them to get a good marriage. And, you know, one of the things that quite often is a stocking stuffer is those
Gold chocolate coins?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
that goes back to Nicholas of Myra, because this is what he would do. But here's one of my favorite stories about Nicholas, and that is Nicholas. It said that one time there were 3 young daughters within his church, and he saw that they were poor and that they were not going to be able to arrange their marriages. And what he did was he had small gold balls. And in their stockings, they woke up one morning. The 3 young ladies woke up one morning, probably in December, and they found 3 gold balls, a gold ball in each one of their socks. And so they took them to the local pawn shop and sold the gold balls so that they could get a dowry price and pay for their dowry. So those 3 gold balls.
That's now the symbol, right, for a pawn shop?
A pawn shop
Yeah.
always has 3 gold balls, and that's how you know it's a pawn shop. And it's because St. Nicholas is the patron saint of pawn shops and pawnbrokers. But here's the other thing, and that is, as a child, when I was growing up, we always had an orange in the bottom of our stockings. And the reason we would get an orange is, number one, it's citrus season, folks. Yay! And then number 2, they very much are like those gold balls that St. Nicholas dropped into stockings, supposedly, somewhere along the line. So that's another great story about Nicholas. And then my third and last great story about Nicholas, and then we can talk about how this relates to our culture and how we can relate it towards kids.
Yeah.
Is that somewhere around 330 AD, Constantine declares tolerance for the Christian religion. And though I'm kind of skeptical as to whether Constantine actually was a Christian or whether he was just
Christian tolerant.
Like he saw the benefits of Christianity in his culture. He saw that Christianity was, in the least, we could say that he saw that Christianity was not going to hurt Roman rule.
Yeah. I mean, his confessions are worth reading. It's interesting.
Yes.
But you're right.
Yeah,
There's
but
not like a...
I put him in a category, something called a politique. I would put Elizabeth I of England in there. I would put Henry of Navarre of France in there. I would put Donald Trump in there.
Not necessarily people who...
Yeah, they aren't people who are Christians, but they recognize the value of Christianity, and so for the sake of their culture and their community, they adapt a Christian tolerance that usually enables Christianity to grow and flourish. Constantine it's recognizes that there's a rift, where there's 2 distinct thoughts that exist within the church. There is a group that follows a guy named Arius, and Arius believes that Jesus was a good man, like a really, really good man, filled with the Spirit of God, but that he wasn't the Son of God.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that conversation, is a guy named Athanasius. And Athanasius is a bishop who from Turkey who says, no, Jesus is God. In every way, Jesus is God. And so what Constantine says is, call the bishops from all around. So they call bishops from North Africa and from Syria. They call bishops from Greece. They call bishops from Rome. They call all of these bishops together at a town called Nicaea. And what Constantine says to those bishops is, you guys hash this out and come up with a singular statement that says this is what you guys believe, because otherwise you're not going to be a strong church. You're not going to affect our government well, because you will be divided amongst yourselves. So they get together. They actually do that. And Nicholas of Myra is one of the representatives who goes to the Council of Nicaea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he is a strong Athanasian. He supports Athanasius in his belief that Jesus is God.
Yeah.
Fully God, completely God.
And a lot of what we base our current Protestant ethic and Christianity on is the Nicene Creed that comes out of this conference.
Yeah, absolutely. So think of it, St. Nicholas is a participant in coming up with that creed that so many Protestant and Catholic churches
actually recite on
every single week, right? Yeah. So here's a great story. Nicholas is in this conference, and he's in this debate with Arius, and the debate becomes heated. And it becomes so heated, you're going to love this. It becomes so heated that Nicholas stomps across the room and punches Arius in the nose, knocks him to the floor, starts this massive fight. They have to restrain Nicholas. Roman soldiers come in and arrest him and hold him overnight because of his violence, and he has to come the next day and apologize to all of the delegates for his violence and his reaction, and confess it as sin. And I love that. I love that.
I thought you were going to tell me he took his cane and bopped him on the head, like in Miracle on 34th Street.
Right. Yeah. Because this is a guy. Nicholas is such a guy who he is sold out. He's a fanatic. He is so for the gospel and for the character and the glory of Jesus Christ, that he's willing to fight for it.
Yeah.
Right? I just think of him as just an amazing character in church history.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So it's okay to like look back on that this time of year and be like, let's continue the, so in your opinion, right? That it's okay to continue the legend because of what the legend is based on?
So what I do is, and what I have done with each of you guys when you've come to me and said, is there a Santa Claus? My response has been to say this, and that is, yes, there is a Santa Claus. His name was St. Nicholas of Myra. He lived a long time ago, and he loved Jesus. Mm-hmm. He loved Jesus so much that he took from his own wealth and he gave it to others because he wanted the best for them. Mm-hmm. And so here we are at Christmas, the birth of Jesus, when we give gifts to one another, but also we reflect upon the character of a man like Nicholas, who, recognizing the power of God in his life, was a good giver and a good lover of men and a good lover of Christ. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we see in the world and its trappings, no, that's not reflective of St. Nicholas.
Right.
St. Nicholas never wore a red coat.
Yeah, that all came in the 50s.
That actually does. That's the Coca-Cola company produces the red Santa Claus. The Clement Moore idea of him driving reindeer and all of that. That's all great mythology, and it's all wonderful, and it's warm and it's cuddly, but it's based upon a good man named Nicholas of Myra. And I taught you guys, yes, there is a Santa Claus. And we can celebrate good people at the same time that we're celebrating the birth of Christ.
That's a good point, too. Man, we get so locked into black and white things sometimes as Christians.
Yes.
We know these people. There's a Christian humorist a little while back who coined this phrase, the Jesus juke.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where like you will say something and then the person's response is
overly that's not
spiritual.
What Jesus would do.
It's just this overly spiritualized retort that like just doesn't read the room right. Like that, you have to over spiritualize a thing. It's the Jesus juke. Like, we're really like you can't celebrate a good man because this is about the only God man, right? And like we get into this either or thinking where you can we not, in the process of celebrating this life-altering gift from God in Jesus, also celebrate other great gifts? Like, we give gifts.
Yes.
Right? Do we have to sit and in this somber experience sitting around do we recreate a manger? Do we find a real baby to put in that manger? And do we all camp out overnight on December 24th because this is the only good way to celebrate Christmas?
Well, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I would do. Actually, I would be okay with the camp out.
The camp out thing, that would actually.
Yeah, we get into these places, right? And so, but I also understand the other side of that, where you don't necessarily want the distraction from the purpose of Christmas. Right? And we can easily get there, where we can get so consumed with all of the events of the season that we do get in this place where we forget that it is about Jesus.
Right.
So I understand both sides of that, but again, I'm an advocate for balance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. And I recognize that there are Christian families who actually never do any Christmas. They see all of Christmas, the whole celebration of it, as a pagan holiday or a Roman Catholic holiday. It's just the other side of it. And there are some Protestants that I know who are so anti-Roman Catholic that anything that has anything to do with Roman Catholicism they throw out. And
Right.
I
So a
kind of
saint is bad news.
I kind of laugh at them and kind of, quite honestly, it's that cruel, and you're going to be mad at me for laughing at their idiocy. But,
Oh, man.
I'll just kind of look at them and say, well, are you going to throw out Jesus too? Because Roman Catholicism believes in the resurrected Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Who physically rose from the dead. So, what are you going to do with that?
And
So-
that whole, for 1,500 years, we were all Catholic thing is tough.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and interestingly enough, I'm talking about that this Sunday in church because
yeah.
we're kicking off a new series. Actually, this is...
You talked about this
I
yesterday?
talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Sorry about
time
that.
travel thing is tough.
Yeah, it is.
We're installing the flux capacitor on the wall in the studio next
Yes,
week.
even now.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday, that there is a superintendence that goes on with the Roman Catholic Church that brings us to that Protestant age, and there's even an element of the Protestant age that launches who we are here at Marsh Corner in a very specific way, and I think we are at this point as evangelicals and even fundamentalists where we totally overlook the benefit of church history that has brought us to this point and so on. So, but going back to the Christmas idea, there's so many overdues.
Yeah.
Right? You buy a Christmas gift because St. Nicholas gave gifts.
Yeah.
You buy a Christmas gift because Jesus received gifts from the Magi, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We buy a Christmas gift because...
And don't forget that wonderful gift of awful noise from that boy playing his
Have
drum.
you seen those memes this year?
Yeah.
Those are hilarious. They make me laugh.
It's just the cruelest gift in all.
Yes. Yeah.
But, man, he played his heart out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And but then that third concept is, the third reason we give gifts is, of course, Boxing Day in Canada and the United Kingdom and most of the Commonwealth countries, where on the 26th of December, the day after Christmas, the norm was to give a box of gifts to your servants and to your children. So there was that Boxing Day gift idea that also comes into the whole
I always
mix.
thought that was the day that Americans boxed the gifts up that they didn't want and brought them
back. Yeah, wouldn't that be?
returns.
Yeah. But I mean, what has happened to that is that it also ties very closely, unfortunately, with the end of the year, December 31st. So a lot of retailers are looking at their inventories, and inventory is taxable according to the federal income tax issues, and so probably you could point to an increase in the whole gift giving push to the establishment of an income tax in the 1920s, and say, oh, because we have an income tax now, all of the retailers have to get rid of their stock so they don't get taxed on it. So they're going to push very heavily to give all kinds of crazy gifts like Chia Pets to everyone for Christmas because they need to get their inventory closed out.
There shouldn't be a problem this year. All their inventory's in the ocean.
It's right.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Seismic shift.
Totally. Which again is why, look, folks, there's an awful lot. They used to call, when it first started, economics was called the worldly science because it was so focused on money. And there's a lot of worldliness in economics, and which is, we're talking.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sin in that, but
Yeah, sure.
It's something that we as Christians should have a grasp on, and that is that, man, they're just trying to make sure that they don't have to pay as much money at the end of the year.
Yeah, which I don't blame them, honestly, for that.
No.
There's just some of the tactics are tough, which this is the thing. Like this whole season, depending on which side of this diamond you want to look at, like you could come off feeling pretty sour about the whole experience, or you could also go way overboard and not approach it with any kind of like thought and just get wrapped up in it. Pun. And then also you could, or you just have this like healthy like understanding of what's going on. Yes, the stores want to sell a lot of product. No, I don't have to be this hyper consumer who buys it all, but I get it. And yes, I love to give good gifts and tell great stories and play up, and increase the enjoyment of my children in the holiday. But no, I don't necessarily have to buy into all of this. And no, I don't have to lie to my kids in order to make that happen. Yes, I will watch all the great movies. No, I don't think those, supersede the real message of you can be in these places.
Yes, we can be in the both and.
Yeah, you're allowed to live in that space. I think that we live with, integrity to who we are, that we know that we are people who have been saved by Jesus. And that his coming is something we celebrate, both his first coming and his second. And, with that in mind, we can live a generous life now, and we can celebrate great holidays in the process of that, and celebrate great stories of people who have done wonderful things for others. That's a holy thing. That's a wonderful thing to celebrate great stories of people who have loved God and loved other people in the process. So how do you have this conversation with your kiddos? Like, I'm in that space at that moment. So my oldest daughter, like, she knows, right, that she knows that, I've had this conversation with her. Like, St. Nicholas was a real human being. No, he will not come down our chimney. My youngest daughter, she's in that cusp at the moment where she's starting to ask questions and she's kind of wondering, but she still likes the idea of a real Santa Claus showing up at our house with real reindeer, and that's still fun for us. But how do you have that conversation with your kids if you're in that space? Yeah.
So first and foremost, I never push the no. I never push the no. I'm one of those people that just says let's let it play out. I don't necessarily push the yes either. I mean, I'm not one of those people who's going to tell. I, for example, have never embraced the omniscience of Santa Claus. That he actually sees you when you're sleeping and knows when you're awake, and that I just never have embraced that concept. It's just kind of, actually, it's kind of creepy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, Santa is a stalker, but I do have. I think that what we used to do back in the day is we had one present that came from Santa because he stopped by at the house. So there was and I don't think I ever said, "Hey, let's put out cookies and milk for Santa." But I think that if you guys had said, "Hey, can we put out cookies and milk for Santa?" my response would be, "Sure, let's do that." Because do you see the fine line I'm walking here? I'm not encouraging it, but I'm not discouraging it. I'm letting them enjoy that process, and let your kids enjoy the process. That it's kind of out there, and you're teaching them Jesus, and Jesus is something that is coming from your mouth, right? So when they actually come to that moment in time where they come to you, and it's like, is there a Santa? Now they're beginning to weigh some of this, which of course they've also already been weighing, because they've noted, for example, there are no sled marks on the roof.
Speak for yourself.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Actually, and like, I was really bad and I didn't get coal in my stocking.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have depravity.
Yeah. Which. Wonderful story. Wonderful story,
too.
Right? My wife, many years ago when she was a little girl, she was making fun of her youngest sister. She and her next sister. There's 5 of them in the family at this point. There were 4. So sisters 1 and sister 2 were making fun of sister 4. And when they got up Christmas morning, they actually did have coal in their stocking. My father-in-law had gone out and removed what was going to be in their stockings and put lumps of good old-fashioned bituminous coal in their stockings.
Yeah,
so
he would do that.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So we had actually, this just came up as a memory on Facebook for me today. Like we had our girls were being obnoxious one night several years ago, and I changed the address book for my wife in my phone and renamed her Santa. And I texted Santa to let Santa know that my girls were acting up. And he wrote back, and I showed them the response from Santa, and which was more like Roz from Monsters, Inc. and less actual Santa. But, so we had... and they straightened up, and we just had a ball with that whole thing, right? Because it can be fun. This whole thing, you can have fun with your family and with your kids, and not be like deliberately lying to them or deceitful. You can enjoy this whole thing, and then when the kids get to this point where they're like asking these questions, you can bring the real story in, which is kind of how we've rolled with this. Because I don't want my kids to feel like idiots.
Yeah.
And then we kind of smile and say, you know what? We celebrate all of these things. This is a lot of fun. Hasn't this been fun? Let me tell you the story about where the idea of Santa Claus came from, and we'll share that story. And then they love that. Like my oldest has loved that, and she thinks it's just wonderful. And my youngest, I think, will love that too at some point when we get there, which might even be this year. We'll see.
And hopefully we don't have any little kiddos that are listening to our
man, we should
podcast.
have dropped a warning at the beginning. Hey, warning, parents.
Warning.
You might not want to listen to this in the car if your kids are with you, and if they believe in Santa. It's a little late for that, isn't it?
It is.
He's real, kids. He's just,
He's just
dead.
Dead.
Santa's dead.
427 BC. Or AD.
That might
ago.
be more tragic.
Actually, I think it was 347 AD.
That might be more traumatic than him not being real. Anyway.
Yeah, it might be.
So, I don't know. This is, friends, like this kind of thing. You can have fun. And this like at a larger conversation to just the Santa Claus thing. This is another thing that is an observance of mine that I've been developing over the last couple of years, because I adore Christmas. It's my favorite time of year, and I recognize I am a strange person. I will finish my Christmas shopping well in advance, but I still like to be in the mall on Christmas week.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing better.
I love it. I love the energy of people like out and rushing around. I was in a store yesterday, and the line wrapped around the inside of the store like twice. And I didn't even need to buy anything. I had something I was thinking about, and I put it back on the shelf. I was like, I don't need to wait in this line, but this is cool. I like this.
Yeah.
And like I do. I love like the rush, and I love the crowds. I remember back in the day, we would be in New York City on Black Friday.
That was amazing.
Oh, so much fun. Like
people would laugh at us for doing that.
Like, see the tree and like the windows at Lord and Taylor and like all of these things.
Walking the main floor of Macy's.
Yeah. It's just, man, actually seeing the Macy's Santa Claus. Like, we've done these things.
We
did. I love
it
all. And I love all of this rush and busyness of this season. I think it's just this great like moment of collective energy that we get to have as a culture. It's something that actually unifies us, and I am saddened that we're not unified by the actual gospel. But man, this is a time of year where we're really close.
Can I tie this back to something I said Christmas Eve at our Christmas Eve service?
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, we've been working on the acrostic of life in our Advent services. Mm-hmm. For the last four weeks in church, it was L stands for God's gift of love. I stands for God's gift of himself becoming flesh, incarnation. Mm-hmm. F stood for the fact that he's brought us into his family. That's quite the gift. E was that it's everlasting and that it's for us now and it's for us in the future. And all of it wraps around this idea of life. Mm. And too many of us as Christians waste this life. Because, and now I'm going to get in, every podcast, right? Every single podcast.
About to say something that'll get you in trouble? Is that
Yeah,
where you're about to
absolutely.
go? Okay.
Yeah,
Trigger warning.
So here's my problem, right? Too many of us are focusing on eternal life, life after we die, and not focusing on living this life really, really well. And there are those on top of that who take the concept of I'm living this life really, really well, meaning that I live it in austerity and I live it as a hard worker, because we're all, we have the Protestant work ethic. We think that we should all work at least 40 hours, and that's really just a piker thing. We need to actually put in 50 or 60.
Right. Work is unto the Lord.
Work is unto the Lord.
Yeah.
There's no room in our Puritanist concept for, as they would call it, gambles and entertainments. There's no fun and games. And the Puritans did not celebrate Christmas,
right?
Because it was a godless holiday filled with all kinds of gambles and entertainments. Here's the thing, folks. Jesus says, I have come that you might have life and that it's full. And I think that it's full of joy, and it's full of peace, and it's full of rejoicing, and it's full of laughter, and it's full of fun, and it's full of entertainment, and it's full of the experience of ourselves. And yeah, you know what sets Christmas apart? Christmas is a day of life.
Yeah.
Absolute, overwhelming, amazing life that just permeates every single part of what we do. It's full of bright lights and garish decorations and the most amazing music ever played anywhere, to the point where I have Jewish friends who say that they absolutely adore Christmas music.
Yeah. Yep.
And it just, of course. So here's the thing. Quoting Ebenezer Scrooge. I will keep the spirit of Christmas all year long, past, present, and future. Every day of my life, I will live in the spirit of Christmas. Yeah. That's because Christmas is all about life. It's about being givers. It's about being joyous.
Yep.
It's about laughter and fun and
awe and amazement and anticipation and all of these great things.
Yeah.
And all of this comes rooted in this world transforming story of God made flesh.
Yes.
Born to a poor young girl in a tiny backwater town in a country that's been overlooked.
Yeah.
And through him, the world's changed.
Yeah.
And all of these things that we have to look forward to, life eternal, which begins the moment of, I talked about in my sermon recently, life eternal begins the moment when you've trusted in Jesus. We'll talk about that more in the soteriology words.
Yeah.
But man, this is it. Enjoy it, friends.
This is life.
And enjoy the life that comes this week.
Yeah.
As we're in that like wonderful week between the holidays of Christmas and New Year's Day, take time to enjoy life. We hope that your family's had a Merry Christmas. We're glad that you have tuned in, that you're part of our podcast family. Share the podcast with others. Let them know. Say, hey, do you know where real Santa Claus is coming from? Here, let me share you this podcast. It tells the whole story. Share us with friends. We'll see you back here in
next year.
Yeah, that old joke. It's time to bring that one out. So we'll see you back here next year. Merry Christmas to everyone.
Merry Christmas.
You have been listening to Inside the Pastor Study podcast with Pastors George and Jeremy Stevens. Artwork by Caitlin Gallagher, music by Sam Demetrius, and engineering help from Ashley Gallagher. To find out more about us, head to marshcorner.com.